What's going on, my fellow A-Plusters? It's your host, as always, Adam Perez, back once again with a brand new episode as we're set to go ahead and get into episode number 3 of the Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power. The current Amazon Prime series winds up dropping every Friday for brand new episodes, so definitely go ahead and check them out. If you have not done so yet, we're only 3 episodes deep. You can definitely go ahead and check out episodes 1 and 2 review over on our channel. We posted that for you guys last week, and today we're getting into episode number 3, an episode that for me really kind of floored me. I honestly thought that they had some very impactful revelations, some very important ties and connections that were kind of established to the overall lore, and so it really just made for a great and impactful episode, if you ask me. I mean, two of the things that really stood out to me, I definitely want to talk about right off the bat. The introduction to the character of Isildur in here. I was not expecting him to be in this series at all. I don't know if he was even referenced in like the synopsis. So like going into the Rings of Power blind, I really had no idea what it was the story, like what was the story that these writers certainly wanted to tell us. And so now that we're kind of getting glimpses of what eventually will be when it comes to Isildur and even the Southlands in here, this was just a very juicy episode in regards to like the nerd inside of me and connecting these really bigger pieces, if you will. Because if you don't recall the name Isildur is in fact the king or the gentleman, I believe, that winds up actually cutting the ring or cutting the fingers and the ring off of Sauron at the last battle, if you will, of the Second Age. And we see that at the very beginning of the Fellowship of the Ring. And Isildur at some point in time does acquire the ring for himself before unfortunately utterly meeting his demise. And so the fact that they are introducing Isildur now at his young age and knowing what he's going to become and the impact he's going to have in sort of the bigger overall Middle Earth history, man, I had no idea he was going to be in this. And so for me, the idea we get introduced to not only Isildur but also his father Elendil in here, I think it really just kind of establishes who he is as a person, right? Kind of following in his father's footsteps as the sea master, training on the sea, right? He even quotes this clearly in the middle of training. Maybe I look at it as like this is like the sailing naval seals, if you will. I have no idea what they're certainly doing, but he's clearly trying to become a sea master, and one of their mottos that they live by is the sea is always right. And so like for me, it's kind of cool to see what his upbringing was like, see where his values lay, see the type of upbringing that his father provided for him, sort of thing, and the mentality that he has as such a young kid to eventually have such an impact. For me, it's actually pretty cool to kind of see what he was like when he was so young, and even get an opportunity to meet somebody like his father in here, who mentions that he does in fact come from a noble line that originated out in the West. He doesn't clarify exactly like what if that's a Middle Earth or if that was someplace else, but I am fascinated to learn a little bit more about where they certainly come from, and so I find it pretty fascinating because again, Isildur will eventually be a descendant of Aragorn that we know from the Return of the King, the gentleman that winds up getting the seat and the crown for himself, sort of thing, right? So it is interesting to kind of see Isildur introduced here. The other aspect that I really enjoyed is kind of seeing some of these storylines finally connecting, especially when it comes to the Southlands, right? We get introduced to Elendil in here, the elf that was at the watchtower that's sort of, I don't want to say having an affair, but definitely having a no-no relationship with a human woman at the town that he's watching over. They clearly go ahead and find these orc tunnels. He goes in to investigate, and last episode we saw that he was captured. He winds up waking up to the idea that he is now a slave and captive working for the orcs. And it's not just him either. It's also the idea that he's got his elf watchtower buddies there, the people that were in charge and that he worked with. Apparently, they might have even gone out and tried to search for Elendil at some point in time, but they too wind up getting captured. So it's like that whole band is certainly back together, and not in the way that they certainly expected to see see it. So really intense stuff going on in the Southlands. Seeing the orcs really have, like, I don't even call it like a slave trade, but they're definitely putting people to work that certainly shouldn't be there. And they just got them mowing down trees and just life in general. I mean, the fact that Arendor even got to sort of the opening of the hole that he was in to chop down the tree to finally see like what the horizon was and where he's at, you can clearly see all the levels of destruction that the orcs are definitely bringing to the Southlands, just absolutely ruining them. And when you get the opportunity to see where Arendir is, and then we jump into the Galadriel storyline when she's in the Hall of the Lord and she finally gets introduced to all these texts and messages and, like, you know, these scrolls and stuff. Just a lot of history in the Hall of Lore. And so one of the things that while she's there she wants to inquire about is this sigil, this symbol that she knows of Sauron that she's been following for years. And lo and behold, the Hall of Lore has additional information for her. And what she comes to discover in here is that this sigil, this symbol, is not even a symbol, but it's actually a location. And that location perfectly matches, when you tilt it on the side, the Southland. And it's not even just a location in and of itself, but it's part of a much bigger plan. And that plan was the groundwork sort of laid for Morgoth, the big bad enemy before them, that they battled and eventually defeated. In case of his defeat, this particular symbol was actually the bigger plan of really establishing a realm for all these evildoers and this darkness and things like that. And they have in fact decided now the Southlands is exactly what it's going to go ahead and turn out to be, a place where darkness and evil can thrive and live amongst each other, if you will, and really again create a realm for themselves. And that realm in the Southlands will eventually turn out to be Mordor, where we see the Tower of Sauron and the Big Eye and things like that from Lord of the Rings. And so to kind of see Arendir, the elf at the Watchtower, being forced to kind of like shape and recreate that Southlands to eventually become this realm that's part of this bigger plan for not only the orcs but his successor as well, which we've come to know is in fact Sauron. It's almost like it's almost like the top was blown off and Galadriel, it all just hit Galadriel and she finally realized what the plan is, something that she's been searching for such a long time. And now she has a much better idea as to where she can certainly start her look for Sauron once again whenever she winds up getting back to Middle Earth. So I just thought these were some really great bigger connections to the Lord of the Rings lore, or Middle Earth lore, if you will. Again, if you've watched the trilogy, so to kind of see the beginnings of all of that taking shape, I'm a little bit blown away. I honestly am. I'm a little bit blown away. But I think it's just all comes down to really great storytelling. The Arendir stuff over at the Southlands, extremely brutal. This series is not holding back when it comes to its violence. Seeing the orc literally like cut one of the elves' throats and stuff, and he starts bleeding. We've got a warg that's literally like decapitating people and eating people's insides and stuff. I mean, they definitely are not holding back when it comes to that. And so I do appreciate them not certainly shying away from it and really taking sort of the storytelling in this series really seriously. And so like even getting the opportunity to see the elves try to escape, right? Like when somebody finally does get over the hump and starts running, I love that shot of Arendir crawling out of the pit, and as he looks up thinking he was going to see his friend fleeing, he sees his friend like just full of arrows, just whoever the archers are just shooting this poor man down right where he stands, not really even giving him a chance. And so you got to think that just Arendir's hope has just been zapped away from him, knowing that there's really no chance of escape. Like, if you can't escape the orcs inside the pit, you still have archers waiting for you outside the pit as well. And so it's just sort of a lose-lose situation, and he's lost all his comrades. Homeboy's the last person standing. They've tried everything that they possibly could, and now he's really the only one left. And I do find it interesting here too that the elves wind up putting the plan together as well, right? Like, they wind up learning from the orcs that Morgoth has a successor, and they wind up assuming that it is in fact Sauron when the orcs are referencing a name by the name of Adar. They keep saying Adar over and over again, like it's somebody that they are bowing to and praying to, right? Really holding in a very high standards. And when you see Adar walking down the corridor, the hallway of these tunnels, he's got the spiked hand glove on. I'm automatically thinking that's Sauron, but what's fascinating is, you know, he's got a face. He's not wearing a helmet. He's got a face. It looks like somewhat of a deformed face, bulbous sort of eyebrow arches, if you will. It feels like maybe really slick, greasy black hair. It was all really fuzzy. Like, you really couldn't tell out. You really couldn't depict like the facial features or anything like that. It really was pretty fuzzy. So it feels like they're holding off on that revelation until episode number 4. If is Adar Sauron, who certainly knows, or maybe this is our opportunity to finally meet Sauron without his mask on. But who knows? Adar could be somebody completely different. But I am fascinated to go ahead and learn a little bit more about that. But again, the Galadriel stuff, the discovery of what the Southlands are, and also realizing Arondir was out the Southlands, I thought was a really cool connection as well. And the other connection still comes with Galadriel in a sense, and that would be her human male companion in this episode by the name of Halbrand. He was the gentleman that was on the ship as well. Those two wind up going adrift, being picked up by Elendil here, and taken to Numenor. Excuse me, I couldn't pronounce it for a second. And then being taken to Numenor. Now, Halbrand, if I can be honest with you, he clearly has a much bigger story here, right? I mean, Galadriel calls him out to being the former king of the Southland, a king that deserted his people, if you will, maybe went on the run. For what reason, that I'm not quite sure. Maybe they'll explain it a little bit more, but the Southland at one point in time did have a ruler, or at least did have a king, and this gentleman in Halbrand was certainly it. And so I do find it interesting that Galadriel, now that she knows this history, knows who Halbrand truly is, now she wants to partner with him and go back to Middle Earth, to the Southlands, and certainly try and win back their land. And so she's trying to really get him hyped to team up with her. And I find it interesting that he sort of gives her a little bit of a warning, right? The fact that it was the Southlanders who actually teamed up with Morgoth to go ahead and take on the elves. And what's also fascinating is that the humans here at Numenor, while they're certainly humans as well, they actually aligned with the elves also. And so we had the elves and the humans of Numenor against Morgoth, and then the Southlanders wind up, the human Southlanders wind up teaming up with them. And so Halbrand gives her the warning, like, hey, you know, my heirs, the people that came before me, worked with the enemy to go ahead and try and defeat you guys. And, you know, now that I am a Southlander, you know, you should be just as cautious with me, that I may not necessarily be on your side. So I do find it as a fascinating team up here. And again, the bigger picture of seeing these characters connected to the Southlands, and the idea of Halbrand being a much bigger character than he certainly let on. And honestly, it was definitely a character trait that I wasn't the biggest fan of. Like Halbrand, to me, the character just isn't very appealing to me, and maybe it's the actor and his performance that doesn't really grab me. Like seeing him portray himself the way that he was early on, and then when he gets sort of beat up in the alleyway and then all of a sudden snaps and he's like this legit fighter that can just take people down, you know, in an instant sort of thing. You know, I'm not, I guess for me, I wasn't the biggest fan of that swerve. I don't want to say it feels a little too cliche for me, but I don't know. It just kind of rubbed me the wrong way, and I just haven't really been that into his performance so far to believe that this dude would even be a king. I mean, granted, he's clearly hiding himself, right, and trying to act different than what he than the nobility that he certainly has, but I don't know, he just rubs me the wrong way. I'm just not a fan of maybe the performance for the Halbrand character overall, but I continue to really enjoy, if we're talking about performances, Galadriel, the actress that plays Galadriel, I absolutely love in here. I love her personality traits. The little clash that we had between her and the Queen was rather interesting. Apparently the Queen of Numenor is not alone. There is a king, but I think Elendil winds up explaining that they have put the king in the tower and have trapped him in there because of the fact that he actually is still very loyal to the elves, and the queen and a lot of the people of Numenor no longer are. And so you could definitely tell it was very intense for Galadriel to certainly even be there. She wants to clearly get off the island as soon as she possibly can, but she's certainly being held up by a couple of days, and maybe it was handled pretty well for her, because at the end of the day she wound up going to the Hall of Lore and learning a lot more secrets and information that she needed to learn that she did not know certainly beforehand. And I kind of dug the relationship between Elendil and Galadriel. Apparently his name in like Old Tongue means friendly to elves, or elf friendly or something like that. And he certainly still stays true to his name, in the sense of trying to it felt very much like he was trying to woo over Galadriel. I don't know if he was, or if it's something that maybe the queen even put him up to, but it was his certainly decision to take her to the Hall of Lore. You know, he tried to smooth talk her with a little bit of elvish tongue himself, you know what I mean, trying to show her like, look girl, I can speak elvish also, and then even offering her a horseback ride, which she immediately fell for. But clearly she loves nature and loves horses, and it really just sort of made her day. And so for me, like, I kind of enjoyed the relationship that was established here between her and Elendil. I am kind of curious as to, again, did the queen put him up to this? Is he truly acting like this because he feels some type of way, or he really is elf friendly? Because it would not shock me if something happens and Galadriel finds out like he's just another human, right? Like, who has all these faults and is corrupt and things like that, can be easily swayed by other people's opinions. I don't know. I mean, Elendil, for the most part, he seems like he's a pretty a guy that has values and is stuck in his ways, to the point of maybe even pushing his son Isildur down a path that maybe Isildur doesn't even want to go. And there's a part of me that feels like Isildur almost wants to take that boat with Galadriel to Middle Earth when it is time for her to certainly depart. And it seems as though maybe his father in Elendil does not like that idea. It feels like he maybe had his whole plan, his whole day, or his whole life planned out for his son, and his son's definitely at the age of like, I kind of want to do something else. I want to take a season off of being a sea master and do something else, and his dad is just sort of not having it, if you will. But so when I look at Elendil, I feel like he's definitely a guy or a person with character and values and wouldn't do something like that, and so it felt kind of genuine in here. So there's a part of me that is truly hoping that it winds up being genuine going the rest of the way also. And then last but not least, guys, I do want to talk a little bit about just Nori and the Starman, or the man from the stars in here, as Nori winds up getting sort of called out. Now, the Great Migration continues. We've got the Harfoots that are certainly leaving their past place. And what I find interesting about the Harfoots and just their species in general, I mean, they talk very openly about people sort of being that might have been left behind, that might not have been able to keep up with the caravan, right? The Harfoots clearly keep their heads down, keep moving, feel very nomadic, especially when situations become difficult. But maybe they used to pick each other up and help each other out in the past, but maybe at some point in time they just stopped. And if you fall behind and you can't keep up, then you're just SOL, you just have to try and survive on your own. And so I did find it interesting that the Harfoot sort of had like a I don't want to say like a memorial, but they were highlighting those that were left behind, throwing up quick prayers or something like that, just to remember their loved ones that maybe aren't on their journey today. And so now Nori finds her and her family possibly in that situation, with the idea of this alien from the stars, or this guy from the stars, sort of stumbling into their encampment after messing around with the constellation and star maps and things like that. He winds up stumbling into the encampment and really just frightens and startles everybody. And now nobody really trusts in Nori or her family, and now they've wind up being thrusted into the back. I really like Nori's the back of the caravan, and that's clearly a situation for them, since the only person that can pull the caravan is in fact her father, and her father badly twisted his ankle, almost like he broke it, poor guy. But they're more than for sure going to be left behind. And so I really like this storyline for Nori. It feels very much like she is the only person that feels she understands that this guy is special. I mean, a man did fall from the stars. This is, this is more than coincidence at this point. It definitely feels like something special, and Nori is definitely tapped into that. Clearly, she's got a great heart, wants to help people, clearly understands that if she doesn't help him, something bad could possibly happen to him, and that he's got to be somebody special. And the fact that he landed near her might mean something. And so, I love that that it's like that Hobbit situation again, like the most unlikely person stumbling across something just extraordinary, right? And them being the only person that can do the job properly. And what I enjoyed too was the fact that while she believes in herself and she believes in the man from the stars, it's even her family and the people that she knows with the constant pushback. Like her mom telling her, you're not special, you're just a child. Like that's got to be some of the most discouraging things to hear as a kid, somebody to say that you're not anybody important like that. Like, damn, really, we got to go there? But that's what her mom says, and just thinks that she's just taking on more than she can chew, and is just putting herself down a terrible path. And so the fact that she's truly the only person standing up for the man from the stars, I do enjoy the fact that at the end of this episode, he recognizes that and calls her his friend. Like, you stood up for me when nobody else did. He was eavesdropping the entire time, seeing the pushback that Nori was giving them, really trying to get them to correct their ways. And unfortunately, the Harfoots are pretty stubborn, and they want to keep themselves safe. And so the fact that this man recognizes what Nori did, now there's a chance that they won't fall behind in the caravan, because he's decided to go ahead and help them. Now you got this giant, or at least this human-sized person, compared to the Harfoots, who is going to be pulling their caravan for them. And you got to assume that they'll definitely be keeping up with everybody. But I kind of really enjoyed the Nori character and the actress. I think she's doing a pretty good performance in here. And again, I thought this episode was really enjoyable, probably better than the other two that I wind up watching. And I'm not taking anything away from those first two episodes. I certainly did enjoy them, but this just felt like a much better, well put together episode. The dialogue was there, the action was there, super intense, very violent, great storyline, some amazing reveals, and really fantastic teases for the future of what the Middle Earth lore will eventually become by the time we get to the Third Age. So great stuff here, man. Great stuff, and great introduction to some amazing characters. But listen, that's episode 3. I continue to enjoy it. If I had to grade this episode, definitely give me an A for sure. No questions about it. But other than that, guys, these are just my A+ opinions. I want to know yours. What did you guys think of episode 3 of the Rings of Power? Let your thoughts be known in the comment section box below, and we'll definitely continue this conversation through the remainder remainder of the week. If you would like to also join us over on our Discord forum community, that's where we talk about a plethora of things around here, including more in depth if you like to for the Rings of Power. So shoot on over to our Discord forum community. There's a link in the description box below, and we'll certainly talk to you then. But until next time, guys, do us a big favor. As always, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and keep it A+. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.